Welcome back to another episode of Insights with Experts, where we aim to encourage and foster discussion, learning, and creating an informed global community. To view this and other interviews in detail, head over to theseer.org, linked in the description. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our channel for constant updates. Enjoy the episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Insights with Experts. Joining us here today, we are very fortunate to have Miss Tepmongkol. Now, is one of the Forbes Next 1000 honorees and is the CEO and co-founder of Ohzone, a 3D fashion tech startup that was recently awarded Top Fashion Tech 2021 by Retail Tech Insights. She has a master's degree from Stanford University and is the holder of 7 patents, where she is the principal inventor. She is the O in Ohzone. Thank you so much for joining us and everything like that. Just to start off with, how are you? How are things?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess things are going, reasonably well. So there's a lot of excitement about digital fashion, especially with NFT. With all our awards and recent traction, we have quite a number of good interests. And it's nice to see that our hard work is paying off,
What inspired you to go into fashion, to go into photorealistic graphics and so on?
Well, I spent, as 30 plus years as engineers, and especially in 3D computer graphics. I would have to say, I know how to work with men who have their quirks, than working with normal people, right? One time my daughter said, "Mommy, did you know that all your friends are really weird?" But that's part of being part of the technical group. Sometimes we have our own quirks and we sort of try to learn how to work together. I'm one of very few women who are still in technology and still doing technical work. Most of us have, the friends that I started with a very few women friends, have gone on to, more of administrative role, like managerial role or, program management, so instead of remaining in a technical work. But I found that, that is my route. I try various things, but this is what I'm passionate about. And this whole thing gets started because my daughter went to college, and this is in 2014. And believe it or not, at that time, Amazon haven't, start selling any clothes, and people just beginning to sell stuff online. Right? It's the early onset. So my daughter, who was in Boston and I'm in San Francisco, she said that hey, she's still copy links and send it to me. Said, "This is the dress I want, I'm going to a date or a party, that kind of stuff." And I'm like, "Why are you sending me these?" Right? We used to shop together as when she was living before college, but now she still want to shop with me. So I thought, wow, we have a really close relationship. That's why she want to continue that activity. But it turns out that, she have closer relationship to my credit card. She always want to use the credit card to pay for that. And I realized that, there was a problem in online shopping, especially for clothes, because she was a student and her credit limit for the student credit card was, smaller. So she could only buy 1 or 2 dresses, right? But since, as online shopping is about buying 10 things and maybe keeping 1. So you have to have enough of a credit limit for you to buy all these things, right? And to try them on at home. So I realized that was the problem. So I wanted to, create an experience where we shop together.
As I was reading your bio and so on, I realized here this one line, O and her team spent 24 woman years developing the patented 3D photorealistic so on. Now, what was the rationale behind it being 24 woman years as opposed to just 24 years? And I think this might be quite interesting.
Well, it was just so it was just a a play on word, right? Because people always said 24 man year, right?
Yeah.
But what we did was that together, my co-founder, even one of my two co-founders are men, but they do have daughters. So, I can see that as an experience that they want to do something different, and they wanted to create an experience that unique to what we wanted to do. So, I mean, it also meant that I actually worked on this technology myself. It's not like I tell people to do this. In general, when they talk about women in tech, they meant women who manage tech company. They themselves have mostly business degree or come from marketing, right? They're not actually doing tech. But my goal was to, I guess, demonstrate or to give an example of this is how a woman invent. And I want to touch on a little bit of invention and creativity. But what is creativity? Creativity is how you solve a problem based on your experience, right? So as a woman and as a unique background that I have, and underrepresented minority, all of that label that you can put in front of me, is that I bring the experience of how I survive and how I succeed, right? And I pour that creativity into solving a problem. So hence that, we come from a different point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really, really important that you actually said specifically that those were 24 woman years. And when I read that, the first thing that I thought about was the first conversation that we had, where you talked about your early years in the workforce and so on, and specifically how you were treated uniquely because you were an underrepresented ethnic minority, because you were a woman and so on. And with that, I wanted to ask, because one of the things that you talked about were the attitudes and perspectives that you encountered along the way, the way people perceived you and so on. And often they had this preconceived idea and they would underestimate you. And I wanted to ask, how did you go above and beyond these expectations and essentially prove these people wrong?
People have told me that, no, you couldn't do that. No, you're not going to be able to do this, right? So I've so many times, have proven people wrong, but it's not the desire to, I didn't start off trying to prove them wrong, right? But I knew that fundamentally, I need to guard my own, what is the most important that you, of yourself, what is the most important, right? And that, what is the most important thing in anyone is our self-confidence, our sense of self, right? And if you lose that, then you're beginning to lose in everything that you do. For me to continue on to a path and be keep a sense of self and keep a sense of confidence, have some self-esteem, is to, my first mantra was, you cannot quit until you're ahead. You have to look at a point of view at what did I learn. I had, before this company, I started a game store, a video game store. And I lost, I have to say, I wear that badge proudly, $300,000 of cash, from what I earned, because, I didn't know what I was doing, and I, didn't know how to run a small business. I tried to, the reason I got into it, because I thought, well, maybe I want to do something different. It's my sense of entrepreneurship. But what I've learned, and and did I feel sad that I lost $300,000? Yes, but I would have to say that, but what I've learned is, I learned about money. I learned about how to negotiate debt. I learned about what real estate lease is about. What is a small business person? What are they struggling with, and how to balance between what customers want and how to bring value. So all of that, right? I mean, it's an expensive lesson, but sometimes you can't learn that any other way. Mm-hmm. So just to go to my early days, I came from a very small town. I grew up in, I would say, quote unquote, really poor part of Thailand. My mother left when I was 8, and she left to come to the U.S. as normal immigrant story goes, and she got remarried. I came to the US at 15 because my father, sent a letter to my mother and said, is not going to college because she took, an entrance exam to the college track and she didn't get it. Right. That's not, it's small. I was from a small rural area. So my mother, did some paperwork, and I came to the U.S. with my brother, and we didn't speak any English, and we learned English from MTV. 1984, MTV just started. We watch MTV. I know who U2, Iron Maiden is, but um, but from then, I had to work in my mother's restaurant. My aunt and my mother has a small restaurant, and at that time, nobody knew what Thai food were. They thought we had to say Thai Chinese food, and we have to learn how to cook Chinese food, and I, learned from there. But I was fortunate enough that a nun in a high school that I was going, I was attending. She looked at me. She go, "Oh, really need the help. I see that you work hard, and I can see myself in you." He said, "What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna teach you math." She said, "I'm gonna teach you calculus. I think that you can do it, especially in mathematics. That's payoff." I knew that math was gonna give me confidence, so I've kept mathematics kind of in my pocket. So when I was, struggling through my job, my first job, there's a lot of discrimination and a lot of prejudice there. I, go back to take classes in math because I knew that if I study hard, I would do well. And that's all my second advice. When you feel that you're really under the water, really feel discouraged, find an activity that would feed your ego, that you know that you would do well, that it has a correlation of your effort. Like for example, you might like to play soccer, right? You go there and you play with your friends and you score a few goals, you feel better. So make sure that you kind of, save that and do that activity to kind of feed your soul, so that you can keep going until you win. Um, and like I told that to my intern when they work with me. I said, I'm encouraging you. I'm not judging you, and I want you to do well. So, all of these compliment I gave you, put that in your pocket. Keep it close because there will be time that you have to take this compliment that I gave you and, reread it because there are somebody who believes in you.
Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. To learn more about Orakui as well as more information about our upcoming episodes, don't forget to follow our socials for constant updates and education content. Links are always in the description.
As someone that's had who's worked in a smaller firm and potentially had a relatively larger role, or as someone who's worked in a relatively larger role but had a relatively smaller, in a larger firm with a relatively smaller role, there are these two contradicting things: large firm, small firm. Which one in working in either of those two did you find you were able to learn more from? And which one would you advocate to, I guess, a younger student?
I would say that it depends on who you are, right? If you are a person who, kind of a little bit shy and, kind of could use some hand holding, I would say that a bigger firm, a more structured firm is probably better at the beginning because then you get some mentor, you get some structure, right? Because the HR department kind of, have a training and things like that you can go through, right? More structure and kind of get you, so you feel more comfortable and be able to kind of, develop yourself, right? Develop your sense of, what you want to do. But however, after 3 or 4 years, the advancement is kind of blocked, right? Once you start off from a young professional and now you become a senior, they call senior professional. That's when you would feel like, well, maybe there's not a lot of room to move up, right? So you have to kind of figure out your way of, how you're gonna move up, right? That's the advantage of big firm. But if you were to go to a small firm, it's a sink or swim situation. If you like the sink or swim, like my husband, he said, I work best under pressure. then that's a small firm, which means you gotta figure out from chaos, right? How you're gonna do that, and then it takes the skill set and it takes the ingenuity and the creativity, but you have to be ready for that, right? And you can, that's depend on who you are, right? I mean, I'm glad that I spent 7 years, which is really long time at Hewlett Packard, but because I had to win, when my first boss, tell me that, oh, I hire you because I can check two boxes. I'm like, what two boxes are those? He go, minority and engineer. I mean, minority and women. I'm like, wow. He goes, normally, you have to hire two people. He said, I did really well. I hire one to fulfill the requirement. This is 30 years ago. People don't say that anymore. And I was really shocked, right? But however, HP has structures and training about, trying to get you through. So I learned a lot from that training about, minority, who you are, how to communicate, how to show up to work on time, all of that I learned the sense of professionalism. But I felt stifled. So when I felt that in a startup environment, when I switched to a startup, because I wanted to have more experience and be more challenged, I felt that the work is more engaging, and I really use a lot of my brain power and also my other skill set aside from just this narrow field of what you're supposed to do. You got to build your own tribe, meaning that you make sure you have friends. You make friends at work, make your network, so where they're going next. Like you can call them up and say, hey, is there an opening there? Don't spend, basically build your own job security by building your own network.
Oh, that's awesome. And in your answer, in your journey, you talk a lot about you really working hard, whether it was in a small firm, whether it was in a large firm. You talk about the fact that you would always work hard. And I wanted to really touch on that because there's been a lot going around lately on the contradictions between should we work hard or should we work smart and everything like that. So I wanted to kind of get your opinion. Do you think there's this binary trade-off between working hard and working smart and we can only do one, or do you think it's more of a finding the right mix of both and using them in conjunction with each other?
You don't get to work smarter unless you work harder first. It's like people who get promoted, they work smarter, but you don't get promoted unless you work harder. You're gonna have to work hard at the beginning, right? I mean, and if you want to be promoted, you gotta work harder than anyone. And my number one mantra in life was, you gotta do the shit job really excellently, really well. You gotta be doing, because that's how you get ahead. Anyone can work at a job that they love and do really well. That's easy, right? But how do you work at a job that you don't really like, but how you get excellent results? Because your boss will then notice you and said, hey, this was a really crappy job, this crappy assignment. Then, then everybody does kind of getting by, right? That's the minimum. Then he would notice you and go, wow, oh, did this really well. Now, that's how you get noticed. And then once you work harder, you will realize how to work smarter. My first boss, his philosophy was that the difference between I always ask him, like, why would you say that I'm an average engineer? Why, I'm not above average or an excellent engineer? He said the difference between, an average engineer and an excellent engineer was that an average engineer is somebody who I give him an assignment, tell him what to do, or him or her, and she did it really well. But what I tell her, but there's a lot of people who could do that, follow instruction and did it really well. But to become an excellent engineer, you got to be able to tell me what I forgot to tell you. Like, here's an assignment, go from A to B. But you got to be able to tell me, I thought about going A to B, but there's a C path that you're supposed to take, or there's a potential problem there. Have you thought about that? Because then now you are telling me what I haven't thought of, right? So that's a different kind of measurement.
I get the point.
Yeah.
And we I think it was probably like the 20-something interview that we had. And it was with this man called Chris Anthony, and he's done lots of mentoring in his life in large firms and small firms and university talks and so on. And he has this one rule: anytime he has a mentee, he would give them 25% of the information, and he would want them to find the remaining 75%. So essentially, he's trying to evoke the mentee to kind of really show what they have, to kind of really think. Because at the end of the day, in life, are you always going to have someone who's going to give you all the answers? I mean, it's, you're going to reach a point where you're going to be in a leadership position. And what happens when, you're the leader? Who are you going to then be finding your answers from? Well,
Right. I think that's very good, because logical thinking is really tough. One advice I would give as mentor and mentee relationship. I used to be a mentee myself, right? And I found my own mentor who would help me. But number one rule of thumb, I would say that is that when your mentor tell you to do something, you don't question it. I noticed young people lately have been saying, why? I said, you go do it first. Come back with the result and then ask why. Because you ask why first. Why? Because you didn't want to do it, right? Then the mentor said, well, I'm wasting time telling you, right? Because they would likely to explain things when you're actually willing to go do it, like blind faith. But they're just trying to help you so that you can go think for yourself, right? And I used to pester my mentor. I said, why did you tell me to do this? What is the thinking process from A to B? Why didn't you tell me to do C, right? I would ask him, how do you think about that? Why did you come to this conclusion, right? And that's what I learned from him. I learned how he thinks. But his rule was, if I tell you to go do something, you better go do it first and tell me what the result is.
So I wanted to now quickly move onto, I guess, the more fashion side of the interview in terms of what you do, the current startup Ohzone, essentially, everything in there. And the first thing I wanted to ask was, I guess, with the use of your technology and so on, do you see this platform taking over the traditional fashion shows that we currently have now?
Well, my view of technology, even though others have used it differently, but my view of technology is to be more inclusive. I meant that I want technology to basically include people who have been left behind, like who weren't included before. Basically, I felt that our technology was democratizing virtual fashion, meaning that we want to be inclusive to, small, medium-sized fashion brand that are not traditionally tech savvy. So I felt that there are, the group of women, especially fashion, it affects all lives of women. And especially for group of women, the first one is the consumer are mostly women for fashion. And the small, medium-sized brand are owned by women. And the third group of women are the apparel worker. They work in the factory. Women and children work in the factory and trying to, have a decent, lives and supporting their family. And the fourth is Mother Earth, right? As fashion has been really an offender in terms of, environment and sustainability. So the way that we have approached this problem is to make it so easy that it's just like taking a photograph to create a 3D fashion, that you could participate in the next wave of technology, which is AR, VR, and digital fashion. The world are shifting. So the digital fashion or the virtual world are now the new battleground where the new, I guess the new content is a contention where who's going to dominate. So I view this as, more sustainable choices. And instead of having to ship clothing overseas or to do samples, now we can do it electronically and without having to, have a lot of knowledge about 3D computer graphics and all that. We basically make it, easier for everyone who owns small fashion brands and to basically increase sales and lower return rate. Also, create fashion show that is more accessible, where it's cheaper. You can put a couple of clothing, you don't have to, be a superstar and participate in the, New York Fashion Week. Now with the new technology, you can have an international fashion show.
Well, what effect do you think that will have, I guess, particularly on the mental health of young people in terms of their self-esteem, as opposed to having these in-person events with these models? Now we have this more inclusive setting where everyone can get involved. What effect do you think that's going to have on the mental health of young people?
To be honest, fashion show events have been exclusive. Fashion industry in general talk about exclusivity, right? They basically charge higher price for exclusive item, and I think that this would open a whole new world of people who haven't been included as in fashion to kind of experience it, right? It's lower the cost, also open up what fashion mean, and I would like to encourage them to be involved to get transparency. And I'm looking forward to of a different young people bring, because I think it's time for us to have to hear different voices and to include yeah.
If you could leave young people with just one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice actually be?
Well, this is my last advice, right? I'm going to tell you a story first. The my daughter's friend, right, asked, heard that I got the Forbes Next 1000, and she asked, "How do your mom get it?" And my daughter answer was, "She applied." That was the answer, right? So basically what it means is that you gotta try, right? The first step to failure is trying, right? And it's okay to fail, but it's not okay for not trying, right? So everybody fails at one point in time, but if you wanna move forward, to progress, you gotta try. So and there's no shame in it. Yeah. That's my last piece of advice. Like, the first step to fail is trying.
Awesome.
So once you understood that, then you would not afraid in trying it, right? So when the my intern is the one who actually fill out the application for Forbes Next 1000. And I asked my advisor, and I said, we need to kind of rewrite it a little bit, and make it prettier or nicer, correct some weird sentences. My advisor told me, said, "Fat chance, I don't think you can get it." He said, "Don't even bother," right? At first, she didn't want to help me. And I said, "Well, the intern, she put in a lot of work, just editing a couple sentences, what's the use? Just hit apply." And then, 7:00 in the morning, I got the email. I thought it was a joke, So I'm like, "Whoa, what happened?" But I realized that, anything is worth the effort. It's worth trying. So.
Awesome. And there we have it. Everyone,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. I really enjoyed that. And look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Well, thank you. And then I hope that there were a few things that, the audience can take home, and even just one thing to take home about the advice. I think that you're already ahead. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to having this talk. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of moving forward, what I'll